They've let us come down from Newcastle, which is a rare. They let us out every now and again to come down south. So I'm very, very pleased to be here. The introduction was fantastic, and yes, we're going to kind of talk about a bit of our journey in both our open dataset publishing, but also our open data science journey and kind of how they link together. Yep, I'm Paul Westrup. I've been at this organisation called NHS Business Services Authority for around 6 years, and it's basically my job recently to try and get the business to publish as much data as possible. And the person who really knows how to do data things, Adnan, a senior data scientist in our wonderfully named Data and Analytics Learning Lab. So, in the very recent past, you wouldn't have been able to do some of these things. We didn't publish or enable any open access to any of our large or valuable data sets. Specific but important and of great public interest, we didn't publish trends or information on things that might happen, for example, in HRT prescribing. Any data science projects that we ran were very useful, but delivered only to internal or to a select few stakeholders. And if it came to wanting to know any of the code or anything, how anything worked and what we did, unless you were a very close friend of a data scientist, an analyst, or a developer, you were very unlikely to ever see that stuff. So, as you might guess, I'm going to tell you that that's changed. But we are still on a journey. We now have a lovely, shiny, open data portal, and it's been fascinating today to hear about all the different research and all the things about what enables a good data, an open data platform. We make our data available in a machine-readable way. It's API-able. And as an example, some lovely, shiny, practice-level data, which accounts for £9 billion worth of the NHS spend, every time you get a prescription from the GP, is now available for analysis, interrogation, innovation. We have an official statistics team who produce insightful narrative reports. They make them publicly available. We've got across 9 different areas of interest. We'll go into a little bit about that a little bit later. But specifically, they've been kind of identified trends on HRT prescribing, the fact that it depends on geographical location, as you might guess, on deprivation. Twice as many patients in the richest areas get HRT prescribing to those in the poorest. We'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. And Adnan's going to talk in about 10 minutes around some of the fantastic open population health projects that we've produced to try and influence policy and to drive change in the NHS. And since we're at this open source and open code event, we make sure everything that we publish in these spaces is available on GitHub. The official stats teams use reproducible analytical pipelines, which can be reused by other teams. And our open data portal is produced using entirely open source code. So, some of the things we're going to kind of go through in a little bit more detail, a tiny bit on who we are. No one ever knows who the NHS BSA are. Most of you will know who the NHS are, but our little bit of it sometimes get lost in all of that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about that journey across everything open data and data science. Okay then. The NHS Business Services Authority. We're nearly as interesting as we sound. We're an arm's length body of the Department of Health and Social Care. But what that actually means is the department, or NHS England, want to do something, they come to us and we do it. So we build the platforms, the services, the products that then enable the NHS to run and kind of do things. As an example, if anyone ever applies for a job, we run the NHS job site. If anyone ever gets an NHS pension, we administer the NHS pension. We account for, across loads and loads of different things, about £43 billion worth of spend in the NHS will kind of run through the services that we provide. As you might guess, there's some interesting data that comes off the back of that. Primary care data is what we're going to focus on today. We are involved in far too many things, and I wanted to kind of pick something that both me and Adnan can cover in detail. So we have something called primary care services at our organisation. It's a massive oversimplification, but essentially, if someone in primary care needs paying for something, something happens, some activity happens, the Business Services Authority are probably the organisation processing that. So every prescription in general practice runs through our systems, and then we pay the pharmacist for giving you your medicine. The same with dental activity. Every time you go to an NHS dentist, we'll process the activity, pay the dentist for their work. Ophthalmic, pharmacy, lots of other fascinating things. And as you might guess, connection to all that world means that we have a lot of data on volumes, costs, which is all very interesting, but also on patient and patient outcomes. So, with that very, very short little introduction to who we are, and I know it doesn't quite do it justice, I want to talk about the journey we've had from taking all that lovely data and how we've tried to make it more and more open. So, this is possibly where we started. It's our data, surely we know best. We've been providing information and data back into the NHS system for 35, 40, 50 years. It's what different parts of the NHS BSAs we've kind of been amalgamated have always done. What we didn't necessarily do was to want to make that open. We identified over the years, and since I've been involved with it, technical blockers to enable that, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I think the biggest one was probably people with this thought process, the cultural blockers that we had. So, in broad terms, we felt we needed to make the case to make data open. What could we do? What do we have to do? But we started from a kind of base of closed data or authorized access only data. So the NHS BSA has had different versions of BI tools that we make available into the NHS. Lots of shiny things, lots of proprietary tools. We're currently very reliant on Oracle to provide us a lot of BI solutions internally to the NHS colleagues. And we've been doing that for a long time. The idea was that all of that lovely primary care activity data, prescriptions, dental, ophthalmic, pharmacy data, was only really interesting to a select few people who wanted to make policy choices and maybe look to make some financial savings. Also, that risk-averse nature kind of made us feel like, well, if we collect the data, we hold the data, we package it, and then we can even choose who gets hold of it, no one could ever tell us we're doing it wrong. There was just that kind of cultural thing that we needed to overcome. We did have technical issues too. We did the usual thing what organizations do. We shoved some spreadsheets onto a website every now and again if we felt that that was worth doing. And we also kind of hashed together or kind of cobbled together authorized systems and then tried to make them slightly open. So you would kind of try and create a guest login. We had something very insightfully called Information Services Portal, which was essentially just a way of kind of publishing data to NHS colleagues still. Someone went, oh, actually, we need to make this open. Could we just create a guest login? Right, job done. Someone can log in as a guest. We're now an open data provider. Aren't we brilliant? That was obviously still a very small amount of data, but also another thing that I'm going to kind of get to later, but another massive blocker on that was that internal flow of getting data, never mind for users, the poor users in all of this, internal flow of getting data onto that was almost impossible. And when it was put there, not machine readable, no API connectivity, no metadata. I've said no documentation. That's probably unfair. There probably would have been some weird and wonderful Word document with an out-of-date logo on saying something like, this data contains pharmacy information, knock yourselves out. But there was very, very little. And as you might guess, users weren't particularly happy with this. This was some of the stuff we got out of initial kind of feedback and user research that we did. Confused, frustrated, jumping through unnecessary hoops. What they really, really loved doing was filling in captchas. That always makes people very happy when they have to click through whether they recognize signs or if they can read indistinguishable letters. And all that was in place for someone to get hold of data that was openly available, supposedly. So, skip past all that negativity. We then attempted to do things properly. And loads of good work came out of this. Shifting that dial on the kind of cultural resistance and trying to change that, if we're going to be really honest, that was pushed heavily by that external pressure. Users, yes, but stakeholders. People going, it's not acceptable that the BSA holds all this amazing data and you're making it hard for us to get to. So we were pushed from outside, as well as I'm hoping internally, and people like me were pushing, well, let's develop a fundamental publication strategy. Let's actually tell people what we intend to publish, what we can publish, the journey we want to go on, knowing that we're incomplete, knowing we're not going to do everything we should be doing, but let's start that journey. We iterated on that in 2022, but essentially, these open data principles we've tried to kind of keep. Open by default. Obviously, everyone likes to say that. I still would say that inside of the BSA, we're open by default where we can. not always where we should be, but we try to be proactive. And we'll talk about our official stats team in a second. We've driven towards being accessible. We've driven towards trying to demonstrate the impact and growing partnerships. And to be honest, what I should have done is have 10, because we saw 10 better ones earlier on. There was a presentation about 10 fantastic principles, but we try to kind of condense those into these 6. Two major outputs from all of this work, really, that are hopefully interesting to you guys. The release and launch of the NHS BSA's Open Data Portal, which for the last 18 months or so has been kind of my life and something that we try to kind of drive on. But this was launched back in March of 2020. It's built using that CCAN technology that lots of people are talking about, which is kind of an open source tool to enable open data portals. It means obviously we're benefiting from those CCAN communities which have been coming back to life and been kind of driving forward with all that kind of stuff. But the big thing was all of a sudden we were packaging data, we were thinking about what we wanted to publish, and it was machine readable. It was available in CSV format. All data we publish onto the portal, it can be reached using an API. And then with business have taken the choice that we need to start and enforce the publication of metadata and data dictionaries alongside everything we do. We now have, when did I get involved? When I started, we had 6 data sets published on the portal around 18 months ago. We're up to 18, 19 and 20 hopefully coming soon. Progress is not exactly everything we want to do. We want to publish more, but we're churning through the information and the kind of the priority that we want to publish in. And I'm going to get a little bit more to something called an open data managed service in a second. But I've got to show off with some vanity numbers. In 2023, 7.5 million transactions on the NHS BSA's open data portal. That always sounds good. Lots and lots of API calls. 6.5 million API calls. That might mean that some people don't know how to use an API, which is what we're a little bit confused about, but it also means that lots of people are using it. The big thing, and it's something that's come up across a lot of this time, is that we've now got one central place for this. There's a battle and a debate about whether the NHS should have one central place for this rather than our organisation as the BSA having one central place. But for those who know what we do at the NHS BSA, which is a big challenge, there is one place where all of our open data lives. It's searchable, it has metadata tags. It should pop up when you type stuff in like NHS BSA data, open data. We kind of pop up. But to go alongside this, I think this is really important, it's something slightly different, was the push and the drive to kind of move into the official statistics space. And this is maybe slightly different. I don't know, other people might know a little bit about this. But often we think about official statistics and we usually think of the Office for National Statistics, we think of the ONS, we think of the census, and that's all lovely stuff. But actually you can apply, sometimes we publish official national statistics, kind of not on behalf of, but in conjunction with those guys. But also we've chosen to produce more and also to apply the voluntary code of practice to everything that we do, which essentially forces the business to consider publishing, which is my big help with this. We kind of have to publish proactively if we're going to kind of apply that code. But anyway, we do some fantastic stuff in the space of sorry, mic gone totally blank. We took these two at the top on from NHS England. So prescription cost analysis and some pharmaceutical stuff, we kind of took that on from our colleagues at NHS England. But we've been developing those ones below, the unbolded ones ourselves, interesting things that we're finding in the data that we think should be openly published based on priorities from the NHS, priorities from our users. In terms of usage, I'm not going to chuck a big number at you this time, but if you think about the types of users for this, massively used in research, academia. We get huge media interest in our publications, which I think is brilliant, because we talk about how do we democratize and get information out to people. Sometimes that needs to go through the lens of a journalist, being able to package this up so people aren't having to sift through documents or data. A recent publication on medicines used in mental health was used 150 times. Our comms team kind of delightfully told us that was used in 150 articles once that was published. So it's kind of holding into account the BSA, the Business Services Authority, but the NHS in general. Finally, in my little section before Adnan tells you some really interesting things, that was lovely. We've got a lovely portal. We have an official stats team. Aren't we doing brilliant? Let's try and make things better. This is something that I've been really pleased that we've been able to push forward. Something that I'm hoping is going to be something I can kind of reuse and we can share with other people. We try to develop this thing called an open data managed service. we did all this stuff. We know it's really important to publish data. We even kind of have a bit of an appetite for that inside our organization. We're really lucky. But it's still quite difficult to do, to actually get a business area who maybe doesn't have loads of analysts or hasn't delivered data out in the public before. So what we try to do is to kind of package up a service that I help run, where we help areas identify the data that might be suitable for publication. We take them through kind of a proper discovery and planning stage where they can do research, they can engage with stakeholders, we can talk to users. There's always internal governance. So I'm not even just talking about the governance of what do we mean by making something open data or an open data license. Sometimes people don't want their data out there. We provide services on the behalf of the Department of Health. They sometimes don't love the idea of every bit of their service being out there in the public. So we try to take people through kind of their governance, what they need to do, how they could persuade people. And also was a question earlier on from a gentleman, I don't think he's here, about, oh, it always feels a bit like people just have a marker in their calendar and someone will put a spreadsheet up onto the portal. Well, we developed a full data pipeline. So what we do is we work with the business area, but then they just dump some data somewhere for us to pick up into a kind of a bucket, AWS or something like that. We then apply all the open data standards based on kind of what we need to do, and we push that out on an ETL basis each month. So that's gone live. And the last bit, and again, a question that came up before was kind of how do you measure success? Well, I banged on about the fact that 7.5 hits and all that kind of stuff. But we publish all usage data onto the portal. It all gets a bit meta and confusing. But every time someone uses the portal, we publish that back on so people can track what's been the most used data set, why, how have they used it, have they connected through APIs. So again, that's out there for the public to see, but also we can use that for our MI reporting and let business areas know. Final bit, because I'm most definitely overrun slightly. The other bit that I thought that we were still missing was this putting users at the center of everything we did. So yes, I'm enabling the business to do better, but we're trying to put those user-centered improvements in. And I'll not go through all of these in loads of detail, but we publish every FOI that the organization gets onto the portal, so it lives with the other open data. It's got its own dedicated area on there so people can search for things. We allow people to follow data sets, get involved in discussion areas on the portal, and we've kind of tried to drive that kind of use of the best ways of doing things. You know, we try to give example API code and guidance. We're trying to drive people to use, hopefully, the most efficient and the best way of them accessing that data. We're pushing the idea really, is to have all of that brilliant stuff, all of that lovely research, all of that managed service, and to bring it together in one unified platform. That's the last thing I just want to finish on, and it kind of links back to what other people were talking about earlier. The open data platform is still separate. It's a lovely open data platform, but it doesn't live with all of the other NHS-based things, not even necessarily the other data that we do. So the idea is, over the next, hopefully, year to 18 months, we'll be developing, and it's a terrible word, and I'm going to hate using it, but they're talking about a data hub. Hopefully we'll get people to stop saying data hub, but a data area, a data platform for all users to access dashboards, open data, narrative reports, data science reports, and all that lovely stuff. And to hear about some of that lovely stuff, he's Adnan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so Paul has just taken you on the open data journey that's happened at the NHS BSA from the perspective of the open data portal. What I'm going to do, I'm going to talk to you about something that's happened in parallel to that, which I guess is the open data science journey that we've been on at the NHS BSA from myself and my colleagues at the data science team. Very quickly, before I talk to you about that, a very quick introduction about myself and who I work for. So yeah, my name's Adnan Sharufi, and I'm a senior data scientist working for the NHS BSA. I've been working there for about 5 years now. So the aim of our team is to deliver new insight into data through innovation, experimentation, and collaboration. And we do this primarily to improve patient care, reduce health inequalities, and to reduce fraud and loss, basically to save money. Our team, we've been doing this for about 10 years. We've completed about 500 projects. We've identified over £1 billion of savings, and recently we've been awarded a couple of awards for the work that we've done. Okay, so that's a bit about me, a bit about the team. So what is this open data science journey exactly? So yeah, broadly speaking, I'd say we started off maybe 3-4 years ago, one way of working where I'd say by default, what we were doing was done, well, it wasn't done in the open. And that's moved to a different way of working where Now we're asking the question, every time we start a project or an analytical report, is how much of what we're doing here can be made open. And when I talk to people in and out of the business, a question they often ask is, so, what made you change your approach in this? And I don't think there's any like one single factor or one single event that kind of prompted that change. But it's more like there's a collection of factors. And for the benefits of this presentation, I've tried to summarize that into 3 key points. I'd say the first of those was that as a team, we were very keen to work on large-scale population health projects that had a large scope. By their very nature, those sort of projects would have to be open. So that was one. I think following that, we wanted to diversify how we worked. In the past, more often than not, almost always, we worked with internal customers on single standalone projects. And at the end of the project, we would give them a Word document or a slide deck or a dashboard or whatever. And what we wanted to embrace more of a storytelling style way of presenting data. So we wanted to generate reports in a scrolly telling format, where you've got that narrative and all your charts and your plots embedded together. Finally, we wanted to embrace open code principles. Yeah, about 3-4 years ago, we were well aware of the fact that we were not publishing like any of our code whatsoever, whereas other NHS organizations were publishing their code. And that was something that we were aware of. Those 3 factors combined made us decide to embark on our very first large-scale population health project with all of the the code, the data, and the report itself being made publicly available to anyone who wanted to access it. That first analysis looked into the take-up of the NHS low-income scheme. And that was back in August 21. This was followed up in January 22 with an analysis of care home prescribing. After that, we conducted an analysis into health inequalities prescribing. This report in particular was met with a lot of interest because health inequalities is such a hot topic in the UK. A lot of people are talking about it. After that, we did another health inequalities analysis, this time just looking at health inequalities in children, which again, very hot topic. We called that the Child Health Insights analysis, and that was published in the same year. That was followed by an iteration of that initial care homes work, turning it into a longitudinal analysis, and that is the most detailed analysis of care home prescribing that's ever been done in this country. And later this year, we're going to publish something that's looking at who is opting out of the NHS pension scheme. The NHS has an ageing workforce. A lot of young people entering the NHS are opting out of the NHS pension scheme, and more insight into that topic is desperately required for policymakers. So yeah, I've talked about these data science projects. So you might be thinking, well, what does it actually look like? Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about one of these in a bit more detail, which is that longitudinal care homes analysis. So all of these population health projects, the code, the data, and the report itself is always open. This particular piece of work, we also wrote up a methodology, so it was fully transparent in what we were doing. We bundled up some of the more useful functions that we wrote into an R package, and we also left open how we're going to iterate this project moving forwards. So yeah, I'll talk about each of those in a bit more detail. So yeah, all the code for the workflow in terms of the report itself, which is built using Shiny and Golem, all of that's on GitHub. We have a full written methodology, so again, very granular, taking people step by step exactly what we did. That was published on our pubs. We created a bespoke R package that takes 2 database tables And just using the address and the postcode is able to match those using the R package DB plier. So we created these functions. We thought these are really useful. Why don't we create an R package? Then anyone else can use them as well. The report itself, like all of these reports, is publicly available to anyone who wants to look at it. All of the data you can download yourself, inspect it, plug it into your own BI tool of choice, whatever you like. And finally, the how we're going to iterate this work is also open. So what I mean by that is, depending how users respond to this, depending what requests they have, that is going to steer and guide how we iterate this work year on year. And now we have a fully productionized workflow. We're going to iterate this work and repeat it year on year, moving forwards from now. So yeah, a quick summary of the journey that we've been on here at the data science team. So yeah, I'd say about 3-4 years ago, by default, pretty much always, we were working with internal customers on single standalone analyses where there was never any need to think about production up front. Access to data was limited to a very small number of individuals, and there was no need to make the code public. So that's not to say that we don't still work like that, because we still do work with internal customers and clients on standalone pieces of work. But I think now we've supplemented that with this other way of working, where we're working far more with external customers and stakeholders on open-ended pieces of work, where we've got production in mind before we start the project, where access to all the data is completely open and all of the code is publicly available. It's not just as a result of changing how we work. I think the impact of our work has also changed, has also benefited. In the past, we were, and still are, I guess, like an insight function. And we were generating insight for internal customers. By working in the open, that's now changed. We're making a greater contribution to national policy. Rather than looking at other NHS organizations to see how they're doing things, other people are looking at us for leadership. And finally, we're starting to get a bit of recognition for what we do, like those 2 awards I mentioned earlier on. So yeah, I hope you found that useful. Hopefully that was of some use. In the next slide, you can have a couple of email addresses for Paul and I, and there's a couple of QR codes, one which will bring you to the Open Data Portal, another QR code that will bring you to a web page where you can see all of our open data science projects. And I feel like I'm preaching to the converted here at Open State of the OpenCon conference. But if any of you were wondering, like, okay, open data, open methodology, yada, yada, sounds like a lot of hard work. You know, surely it's a lot easier. You're going to save time and money by not doing that. There is a perspective where that does make sense, but I guess it fails to see the big picture. And I think that if you are an analyst or data scientist, by conducting your analyses or your analytical projects in the open, you end up working with a more diverse set of people on work that has a larger scope and ends up having a greater impact. Thank you.